Welcome to Daily Life in the Past. Here, we explore how ordinary people lived before modern technology and comfort shaped everyday life. If you enjoy learning about the past, feel free to leave a comment and let us know where you are watching from. And if you would like to support the channel, a like or subscription is always appreciated. For most of human history, everyday discomfort was not a problem to solve. It was a normal part of life that people planned around. Cold rooms, smoky air, rough clothing, heavy labor, loud streets, smells from animals and waste, bugs in bedding, and long waits for help in an emergency were expected parts of the world. Today, many people think of comfort as a standard. They expect steady warmth, clean water on demand, bright lighting at night, quick medical care, and fast responses from public services. But these expectations are very new. In older societies, comfort existed, but it was limited, unevenly shared, and often less important than safety, tradition, work, and survival. This video explains how discomfort was accepted as normal life across several historical periods. It also explains how systems of law, investigation, and punishment worked before modern law enforcement, and how those systems shaped daily life. The goal is not to praise or criticize the past, but to understand what people expected, what they could control, and how they built resilience inside a world that rarely felt physically comfortable. First, it helps to define what discomfort meant in daily life. Discomfort is not only pain. It can be any ongoing strain the body and mind must carry. It includes being cold, being too hot, being hungry, being dirty, being exhausted, being crowded, being constantly alert to danger, or being unable to rest well. In the past, many discomforts were not seen as signs that something was wrong. They were seen as the price of living. People did not constantly compare their lives to an ideal standard of comfort, because that ideal did not yet exist for most people. Instead, they compared their lives to neighbors, to local customs, to religious teaching, and to what their parents had taught them to endure. A major reason discomfort was normal is simple. Energy was expensive and hard to control. Before modern power systems, most energy came from human muscles, animal muscles, wood, charcoal, wind, and water. These sources were limited. They were also difficult to store and move. The result was that everyday tasks took more time and more physical effort. Heating is a clear example. For much of history, a home's warmth depended on firewood, charcoal, peat, dung, or later coal, plus the ability to burn that fuel safely indoors. Even when a family had a fire, it usually heated only one main space, and even that space could remain chilly. Heat escaped through gaps in walls, windows, doors, and roofs. The warmest place might be near the fire, not across the room. People adapted. They wore layers indoors. They used wool and heavy cloth. They slept close together for warmth. In many places, they treated cold as normal and planned daily routines around it. Cold was not only a comfort issue. It shaped health and safety. When homes were cold and damp, respiratory illness and joint pain could be common. But people had limited ways to prevent this beyond improving building materials, burning more fuel, or changing routines. Extra fuel meant extra work and extra expense. Light is another example. Before widespread gas lighting and electricity, light at night was weak and costly. Candles and oil lamps required supplies and careful handling. Many households used dim light and went to bed earlier. Darkness affected work schedules, reading, travel, and public safety. Because light was limited, night could feel less controlled than day. That, in turn, affected law enforcement and crime. If a person was attacked or robbed at night, identifying the attacker could be difficult. Witnesses might be unsure, and before modern forensic tools, lack of clear observation often meant lack of proof. Now consider water. Clean water systems are among the most important comfort changes in human history. In many older towns and villages, water had to be carried by hand, from wells, streams, pumps, or communal sources. That meant daily labor and constant planning. Water was also linked to disease. Even when people did not fully understand germs, they observed patterns of sickness connected to foul water and crowded living. But solving these problems required large systems, pipes, sewage, street planning, and steady maintenance. Those systems came slowly and unevenly. Sanitation brings us to another daily discomfort: smell. Before modern sewer systems and waste treatment, waste disposal was a constant challenge. In rural areas, waste could be managed with distance and land. In dense towns, it became a public problem. Human waste, animal waste, butcher shops, tanneries, and trash could create strong smells. These smells were not just unpleasant, they signaled real risks: parasites, spoiled food, and disease. Yet people still built normal lives in these conditions. They created rules about where certain trades could operate. They used lime, ash, or other materials to manage odors. They opened windows when weather allowed. They moved wealthier homes away from the worst areas when they could. Food created another kind of discomfort: uncertainty. For many families, especially in agricultural societies, diet depended on seasons and harvests. If crops failed, hunger could become common. Even in better years, many people ate simple diets that did not always provide steady variety. Food preservation was limited. Salting, drying, smoking, fermenting, and pickling helped, but quality changed over time. Fresh food was not available year-round in the way many people now expect. This affected resilience. When people cannot rely on constant food supply, they learn to accept hunger at times, stretch meals, and share within networks. They also learn to treat fullness as something that comes and goes, not a guaranteed daily condition. Clothing and personal comfort were also very different. Cloth was expensive in labor and materials. Clothing was often repaired many times. It could be stiff, heavy, or rough. Washing clothing was hard work. Soap and fuel mattered. Drying could be difficult in cold seasons. Bedding was another area where modern assumptions can mislead. Many people did not have perfectly clean, soft, private sleeping spaces. Mattresses could be filled with straw or other materials that needed replacement. Bugs could be common. Shared beds were normal in many settings, not only because of poverty, but because of heating needs and space limits. Over time, ideas about privacy and comfort changed. In many parts of Europe and North America, for example, the modern private bedroom for each person is a relatively recent expectation for ordinary families. Earlier homes often used multi-purpose rooms. Sleeping arrangements changed with economic status, building styles, and cultural norms. So far we have described physical discomfort: cold, heat, darkness, heavy labor, water carrying, smell, and crowding. But there was also social discomfort, which can be just as strong. Many societies had strict hierarchies. A person's status could shape what they were allowed to wear, where they could live, what work they had to do, and how they were treated by courts and authorities. In such societies, discomfort was not only tolerated, it was sometimes used as a signal of social position. Hard work and limited comfort could be viewed as normal for lower classes, while greater comfort could be seen as a privilege for elites. In some times and places, public displays of luxury could also create moral criticism, so even wealthy households balanced comfort with ideas about restraint and respectability. Religious and moral teachings sometimes supported this. Many traditions praised endurance, discipline, and moderation. Comfort could be seen as a temptation to laziness, pride, or moral weakness. This did not mean people disliked comfort. It meant they had mixed feelings about it, and their public language about comfort could be cautious. Now, to understand why discomfort was accepted as normal, We must look at the systems people relied on when things went wrong. If a home was robbed, if a neighbor attacked someone, if property was destroyed, or if a traveler disappeared, how did people respond without modern police departments, forensic labs, or instant communication? In many historical societies, the first level of safety was not a professional force. It was community responsibility. This was true in many parts of the world in different forms. Here, we will focus on a well-documented example from medieval and early modern England, because it influenced later legal systems in Britain and North America. For long periods, law enforcement was largely local and part-time. Communities depended on ordinary people to witness events, raise alarms, chase suspects, guard streets at night, and bring suspects to local authorities. Officials like constables and watchmen often had limited training, limited resources, and limited time. They were not the same as modern police officers whose full-time job is investigation and public safety. One well-known practice was the hue and cry. If someone saw a serious crime, they were expected to raise an alarm so others could join the pursuit. This was a practical response to a world without radios, cameras, or quick transport. It used what the community did have: people within shouting distance. In this system, public participation was not optional in the way we might assume today. In many places, failing to help could bring penalties. The community could be held responsible when criminals were not pursued. Another practice was night watch. Towns used watchmen to patrol or guard gates and streets, especially at night. These watch systems were not always strong. Watchmen could be elderly or unwilling. They might carry simple tools, not modern weapons. Their presence could deter some crimes, but it could not solve every problem. The result was that ordinary people often built their lives around the expectation that public protection was limited. They locked doors, but locks were not perfect. They used dogs. They relied on neighbors. They avoided travel at dangerous times. They used well-lit or busy routes when possible. They stored valuables carefully. They formed social ties that created informal protection. When a crime happened, investigation worked differently than today. Modern people often picture investigators collecting physical evidence, interviewing witnesses in a structured way, and building cases for prosecutors. In many older systems, the burden was more private. Victims and families played a larger role in pursuing justice. They might have to find witnesses, bring accusations, and push the case forward. Local officials could help, but they did not always lead a full investigation. Evidence also looked different. Without modern forensic science, courts often relied heavily on witness testimony, community reputation, and visible facts, like stolen goods found in someone's home. In smaller communities, people knew each other's habits and conflicts. That could help establish likely guilt or innocence, but it could also create bias. This reality shaped everyday behavior. If a person's reputation mattered in court, then daily life included constant reputation management, being seen as honest, paying debts, following community rules, and maintaining good relationships. In that sense, discomfort included social pressure. People lived with the ongoing strain of being watched by neighbors and judged by local authorities. Privacy was limited. Rumors had power. A dispute could affect a family's standing for years. Punishment, too, functioned differently. Modern societies often use long-term imprisonment as a common punishment. But in many earlier periods, large prison systems were not the main tool. Instead, punishment often aimed to be public and immediate. Fines, physical punishment, public humiliation, and public displays of justice were common. Stocks, pillories, whippings, and other penalties were used in different times and places. For serious crimes, execution could occur. This shaped the feel of daily life. People were used to seeing punishment as part of community order. The goal was partly deterrence, partly moral instruction, and partly restoring social balance. Whether these methods reduced crime is a complex question and varied by place and time, but the presence of visible punishment made justice feel close and physical. This is another form of everyday discomfort, the discomfort of living under harsh penalties and uncertain protection. In many settings, the same community that shared labor and survival also enforced norms with pressure and punishment. Next, consider medical discomfort. Even in advanced historical cultures, medical care was limited by knowledge and tools. Pain relief was restricted, surgery was dangerous, infection was common, childbirth carried high risks. Many people accepted that illness could be disabling or fatal. This did not mean people gave up. They used available remedies. They relied on family care. They sought healers. They practiced prevention as they understood it, but the baseline expectation was not that every illness could be treated effectively. That expectation is closely tied to modern comfort. When people believe most problems have solutions, they treat discomfort as temporary and unusual. When solutions are uncertain, discomfort becomes a normal part of planning. Now we can step back and look at a larger shift, the rise of comfort as a cultural goal. Comfort is not only a physical condition, it is also an idea. Across time, especially from the early modern period into the industrial age, the idea of a home changed in many societies. Homes gradually became places not only for shelter and work, but also for privacy, relaxation, and personal identity. This change did not happen overnight. It took new building methods, cheaper manufactured goods, improved heating systems, better lighting, and larger networks that could deliver materials. It also took social change, growing middle classes, new forms of family life, and new standards of cleanliness and order. In many Western societies, the 1700s and 1800s saw major changes in home interiors. More padded furniture, curtains, carpets, wallpaper, and specialized rooms became more common over time, especially for people who could afford them. These objects were not only decoration, they controlled drafts, softened sound, increased privacy, and made long indoor hours more bearable. At the same time, these changes raised expectations. Once a household experienced better warmth, better light, and better furniture, discomfort began to feel less normal. It began to feel like a problem that could be solved, but comfort spread unevenly. Cities often gained new systems earlier than rural areas, but cities also had crowding and pollution. Wealthy homes improved faster than working-class homes. Some regions modernized earlier than others. Even within a single town, comfort could differ sharply from street to street. Comfort also created new kinds of discomfort. As standards rose, people became more sensitive to things once ignored. Smells that were once tolerated became unacceptable. Dirt that was once normal became a sign of neglect. Noise that was once part of city life became something people wanted to block. This is not simply a matter of becoming weaker. It is a shift in what societies consider normal. When a community expects clean streets, quiet nights, and warm rooms, it builds systems to enforce those expectations. It creates building codes, sanitation departments, professional policing, and public health rules. In earlier periods, those systems were smaller or absent. People relied more on household skills and local custom. They adapted their bodies and routines. They accepted that the environment would not always cooperate. Now let us examine resilience, because it is often misunderstood. Resilience is not the same as enjoying hardship. In most periods, people tried to reduce discomfort when they could. They wanted warmth, rest, and security. They simply had fewer tools and fewer stable systems to provide those things. Resilience often came from four main sources. First, skills. People learned practical skills to manage discomfort, building and repairing homes, making and mending clothing, preserving food, treating minor injuries, and handling animals. Many families could not afford to outsource these tasks. Second, Routines. Daily schedules matched seasons and daylight. Work happened when conditions allowed. Winter and summer changed life patterns. People conserved resources and used them strategically. Third, community. Neighbors shared information, helped in emergencies, and enforced norms. Community ties could provide real support, but they could also create pressure and conflict. Fourth, expectations. Expectation is one of the strongest forces shaping how discomfort feels. If a person expects the home to be cold in winter, that cold may feel normal, even if unpleasant. If a person expects the streets to be dark and risky at night, they plan accordingly. If a person expects illness to be common, they interpret sickness differently. Expectations do not eliminate suffering, but they change how people interpret it and how they cope. This is also where justice and law enforcement connect back to comfort. When protection systems are limited, insecurity becomes normal. People may accept that theft happens, that recovery is uncertain, and that punishment can be harsh. They may invest more in prevention than in post-crime solutions. They may also tolerate more local conflict resolution. Many disputes were settled through local negotiation, community mediation, religious authorities, or informal agreements, because formal legal processes could be costly, slow, or uncertain. This could reduce some tensions, but it could also leave weaker people with fewer protections. So discomfort was physical, social, and legal. It was part of how society functioned. Now consider travel, another area where discomfort was normal. Travel was slower, more dangerous, and more exhausting. Roads could be poor. Weather could stop movement. Lodging could be crowded. Food could be simple. Banditry and theft were real concerns in some places and times. With limited police forces, travelers relied on local hospitality networks, inns, guild connections, or official letters of passage. In many areas, a traveler's safety depended on the reputation of the road and the strength of local authority. Again, discomfort shaped planning. People traveled less often. They carried fewer fragile goods. They accepted delays. They built extra time into travel because speed was not guaranteed. When we look across many centuries, a broad pattern appears. Discomfort declines when societies gain reliable systems. Comfort is not only about having more stuff, it is about having dependable infrastructure, heating, lighting, clean water, sanitation, stable food supply chains, effective medical care, and organized public safety. As these systems expand, discomfort becomes less frequent and more surprising when it happens. Professional policing is part of this shift. When law enforcement becomes a specialized profession with training, pay, oversight, and consistent presence, ordinary people do not have to personally perform as many enforcement tasks. Investigation becomes more systematic. Courts rely more on collected evidence and procedures. Some crimes are prevented by patrol and surveillance. This does not eliminate crime, but it changes what daily safety feels like. It also changes what people expect from the state. In older systems, many people expected to protect themselves and rely on local networks. In modern systems, people often expect official services to respond. When those services fail, it feels abnormal. In the past, limited response could be normal. That normality could be frustrating, but it was widely understood. Finally, we can summarize the main idea. Everyday discomfort was normal life for most people in most periods because physical environments were harder to control, resources were limited, and public systems were smaller. People adapted through skills, routines, community ties, and expectations. They worked within justice systems that depended heavily on local responsibility, visible enforcement, and private pursuit of wrongs. These systems shaped daily choices about work, sleep, travel, safety, and reputation. As technologies improved and infrastructure expanded, comfort became more common and more expected. Over time, discomfort shifted from being a daily background condition to being a problem to fix. That change did not happen all at once, and it did not happen equally for everyone. But it changed how people built homes, organized cities, understood cleanliness, managed risk, and thought about what a normal life should feel like. Understanding this helps explain why older societies often appear harsh by modern standards, and why their people often developed practical resilience. It also helps explain how modern comfort is not only a personal experience, but the result of large systems that quietly support daily life. Systems that earlier societies either did not have or could not fully sustain.